The Young and the Restless spoilers. Sally's world had spiraled into darkness. A combination of uncontrollable jealousy and deep-seated hatred had warped her perception of reality, pushing her beyond the boundaries of reason. In her eyes, Phyllis was not merely an adversary, she was the ultimate saboteur who had, in Sally's warped judgment, undermined everything Sally held dear. This toxic cocktail of emotions drove Sally to believe that the only way to restore balance was to confront Phyllis in the most extreme manner imaginable. Thus, one fateful night, under the cloak of shadows, Sally resolved to teach Phyllis a lesson from which there would be no escape. As the moon cast long, eerie shadows across the quiet streets, Sally moved stealthily, her mind a chaotic battleground of anger and sorrow. With each step, the echoes of her troubled past and unrequited desires resounded in her ears. The memory of a love so fierce it had blinded her now fueled her actions, pushing her to take a course that would soon shatter not only her life but also the fragile peace of those around her. It was in a deserted building, far from prying eyes, that Sally intercepted Phyllis. Without warning, Sally lunged forward, her actions swift and driven by a force that seemed beyond her control. Before Phyllis could fully comprehend the peril, she found herself overpowered, bound, and rendered helpless. In that chilling moment, Sally's inner turmoil was unleashed in a torrent of rage and distorted affection. Hours later, Phyllis slowly regained consciousness. Her eyes fluttered open to a disorienting darkness that gradually gave way to a dim light. Panic surged through her veins as she realized her predicament. She was tied to a creaky wooden chair in a musty, abandoned room. The metallic tang of fear mingled with the cold sweat on her skin. Across the room stood Sally, a figure as enigmatic as she was terrifying. The intensity in Sally's eyes was unmistakable. Behind them lay a mixture of fervent passion and dangerous resolve. "Sally," Phyllis rasped, struggling to free herself, "what have you done? I don't understand, why are you doing this?" Sally's voice was unsteady, yet laced with a venom that cut through the tense silence. "You're the reason everything's falling apart, Phyllis. Your deceit, your manipulations, they've poisoned everything I ever cared about. I only wanted to make you understand the pain you've caused." Her words, heavy with accusation, reverberated in the cold room, each syllable a dagger aimed at Phyllis's soul. Phyllis's heart pounded as she tried to grasp the reality of the situation. "I've done nothing wrong. I never intended to hurt anyone," she argued, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're the one who's lost control, Sally. You're letting your love, your misguided love, cloud your judgment. How can you be so sure that I'm your enemy?" The tension in the room was palpable. Sally's eyes darted back and forth, conflicted yet resolute. "If you try to escape," she warned in a low, menacing tone, "I promise you, you will only bring more suffering upon yourself, and trust me, I can't bear the thought of what might happen." There was a desperation in Sally's words, a silent plea that spoke of a deep-seated fear, the fear of being hurt, of being abandoned by the one she loved. Meanwhile, miles away from this unfolding drama, a parallel crisis was brewing. Summer and Daniel, already engulfed in a wave of panic, were desperately trying to reach their mother. The sudden disappearance of her phone calls had left a void that could only be filled with worry and anxiety. Summer, in particular, felt an inexplicable chill. Even though Phyllis had texted her children that she was away on a business trip, something about the message didn't sit right with her. The tone was off, and there was a hesitance, a coldness that belied the usual warmth of her mother's words. "Daniel, something's not right," Summer whispered, her voice trembling with concern as she paced the length of their dimly lit living room. "I can't shake the feeling that the message we got was fake. It's like a premonition that something terrible has happened." Daniel, equally anxious yet trying to be the pillar of strength for his sister, attempted to reassure her. "Mom wouldn't just vanish without a word. But we need to check on her. I'm calling the police, maybe they can track her location," he said, though his tone betrayed his own uncertainty and fear. Back in the room where Sally held Phyllis captive, the intensity of the confrontation reached its peak. Phyllis's eyes blazed with indignation and a flicker of defiance. I won't let you believe that I'm your enemy, Sally. You're lost in this twisted version of love, a love that's made you do things you'll regret. I am not the one who should be punished here. For a moment, silence reigned between them, broken only by the distant hum of a city unaware of the storm brewing within these walls. Sally's face contorted with anguish and madness, a portrait of a woman teetering on the edge of complete collapse. I've tried to be reasonable, but you've left me no choice. I must force you to see the error of your ways, she muttered, her voice cracking under the weight of conflicting emotions. The situation was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Sally's actions, fueled by a singular obsession and the corrupting influence of unbalanced love, were now bordering on criminality. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. In her deluded mind, every hurtful word, every perceived betrayal by Phyllis, had justified this violent intervention. But the repercussions of her actions were now closing in like a noose around her neck. In the broader tapestry of their lives, this act of kidnapping was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a series of events that had steadily unraveled the fabric of trust and understanding that once held these families together. Phyllis, who had always tried to navigate the treacherous waters of personal and professional relationships with caution, now found herself at the mercy of a woman whose sanity was fraying at the edges. As the hours dragged on in that dimly lit room, the inevitable questions loomed large. Would the authorities arrive in time to save Phyllis? Would Sally, in her frenzy, be stopped before she could inflict further harm, not just on Phyllis but on herself as well? And what of Summer and Daniel, whose desperate search for their mother could uncover secrets that might shatter the illusion of normalcy they had clung to for so long? The silence was finally broken by the distant sound of sirens, a promise of imminent intervention. In that moment, Sally's eyes widened, and the reality of her situation hit her with full force. The time for dark resolutions was drawing to an end, replaced by the harsh light of legal and personal reckoning. She had acted in the name of love, but that love had transformed into an uncontrollable force of vengeance. Phyllis, still tied and battered by the events of the night, managed to gather a strength she never knew she possessed. "Sally," she said, her voice resolute despite the fear coursing through her veins, "I don't know what twisted road led you here, but this isn't the way. If you let me go, maybe we can both find some semblance of redemption in the truth." Sally hesitated, caught in the turbulent crossfire of her own emotions. For a brief moment, the facade of hatred wavered, revealing a glimpse of the pain beneath, a pain born of love lost and dreams shattered. But before any reconciliation could take root, the heavy knock of justice arrived at the door. Officers burst into the room, their presence a stark reminder of the consequences that awaited Sally's actions. The scene that unfolded was as dramatic as it was tragic, a culmination of betrayal, misguided love, and the tragic cost of allowing jealousy and hatred to dictate one's actions. As the police restrained Sally and began the arduous process of unraveling the tangled web of emotions and motivations behind her crime, Phyllis was left to confront not only the physical scars of her ordeal but also the emotional fallout that would linger long after the night had ended. In the days that followed, the community was rocked by the revelation of Sally's actions. The media swarmed with accounts of the dramatic kidnapping, the police investigation, and the ensuing trial that promised to be a landmark case. Meanwhile, Summer and Daniel's worry for their missing mother turned into a full-blown investigation of their own, as they worked tirelessly to uncover the truth behind the deceptive text message and the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the case became a mirror reflecting the deeper, systemic issues at play, issues of trust, the dangerous interplay of love and obsession, and the often blurred line between protecting those we care for and becoming their captor. In the courtroom, Sally's defense argued that her actions were the tragic result of overwhelming emotion, a misguided attempt to reclaim a lost love, twisted by jealousy into an act of desperation. The prosecution, however, painted a starkly different picture, a woman who had lost all semblance of reason, endangering lives and breaking the sanctity of personal freedom. Phyllis, now emerging as both a victim and an unexpected catalyst for change, became the focal point of a broader conversation about the impact of unchecked emotions and the dire need for psychological support in times of personal crisis. Her ordeal was not just a personal battle, but a cautionary tale that resonated with many who had ever felt cornered by their own emotions. In the end, the story of that fateful night was one of irreversible change, a moment where the line between love and hatred was irrevocably blurred, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives and unanswered questions. Sally's descent into madness, driven by a love that had become a curse, served as a stark reminder that passion, when left unchecked, can lead to devastation beyond repair. And as the community grappled with the aftermath, it was clear that the ripple effects of that night would continue to shape the lives of everyone involved for years to come. In the dark underbelly of Genoa City, chaos reigned. The once familiar streets had become the backdrop for a tale of obsession, betrayal, and spiraling madness. It all began with Sally, a woman whose once confined jealousy and seething hatred for Phyllis had evolved into a dangerous, all-consuming force. In Sally's distorted mind, Phyllis wasn't merely a rival, she was the embodiment of every betrayal and slight that had ever pierced her fragile heart. Convinced that the only way to set things right was to deliver a harsh lesson, Sally hatched a plan that would forever alter the lives of everyone involved. That fateful night, Sally had snatched Phyllis away, dragging her to an abandoned basement in the outskirts of town. Bound to a creaking wooden chair in a dank, dimly lit room, Phyllis awoke to a surreal nightmare. Her eyes, wide with terror, met Sally's, a gaze burning with both wrath and sorrow. "You're the cause of everything," Sally hissed, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury and anguish. "If you even think of escaping, the consequences will be dire." Phyllis, still dazed, could only protest in vain, her desperate pleas echoing off the cold walls as she insisted, "I haven't done anything wrong. Please, let me go." As the hours passed in that claustrophobic space, the distant wail of sirens grew faint, leaving Phyllis to endure a relentless barrage of accusations and bitter words. Outside, the repercussions of Sally's actions began to ripple through the community like a dark stain spreading across an immaculate canvas. Summer, who had been anxiously awaiting her mother's call, was now engulfed in a fury that boiled over into accusations aimed directly at Sally. "It has to be Sally," she screamed to anyone who would listen. "In Genoa City, she is the only one who hates Phyllis with every fiber of her being." Her voice, a blend of anger and despair, resonated through the corridors of her home, where worry had already taken root. Summer's conviction was unyielding, even as evidence of her mother's absence piled up like ominous signposts along the path of a tragic mystery. Standing firm against Summer's escalating anger was Billy, who had rushed to defend his beloved girlfriend. "You're being irrational," Billy argued, his tone calm yet assertive as he tried to steady the tumult of emotions swirling around him. "She's gentle, caring, she's never capable of committing something so monstrous. Don't let your imagination run wild, this isn't about a vendetta or some crazy notion. We have to trust that there's more to this than meets the eye." His words, meant to soothe the brewing storm, only added to the complexity of an already volatile situation. In the midst of these unfolding events, Phyllis's cries for help continued unabated. Locked in the confines of the basement, her voice echoed off the cold stone walls as she shouted for rescue. Yet every desperate call fell into a void, unanswered and swallowed by the oppressive silence that had descended over her. The isolation of her plight was compounded by the realization that, in that moment, she was utterly alone, a prisoner of Sally's tormented love and twisted sense of justice. Unbeknownst to everyone, Chance, a man whose reputation for relentless, if unconventional, investigations was as notorious as it was controversial, had taken a keen interest in the unfolding drama. With a singular focus, Chance began tailing Sally, determined to uncover the truth behind her every move. Rumors in Genoa City suggested that Chance was nothing more than a useless cop, a badge-wearer who had never truly brought solace or resolution to those he was meant to protect. Still, his fixation on Sally was unwavering. Wherever she went, Chance was sure to be lurking in the shadows, documenting every detail of her movements. His presence, though shrouded in secrecy, loomed as a silent testament to the ongoing investigation that threatened to unravel the tangled web of emotions and motives at the heart of the crisis. Back in the grim confines of the basement, Phyllis's resilience was beginning to surface despite the oppressive despair. Her mind, though clouded by pain and fear, clung to a defiant hope that help might still arrive. "Sally, please," she pleaded once more, her voice cracking as she tried to reach the humanity buried beneath the madness in her captor's eyes. "I understand you're hurting, but this isn't the way. You're blinded by a love that's turned toxic. This isn't a punishment for me, it's a punishment for you." Yet, Sally's eyes remained cold, hardened by the deep-seated belief that her actions were a necessary act of retribution. Elsewhere, Summer and Daniel's frantic search for their missing mother had ignited a maelstrom of anxiety that swept through the community. Despite Phyllis's earlier text explaining that she was away on a business trip, Summer's intuition screamed otherwise. "There's something off about that message," she confided to Daniel, her eyes filled with a mix of suspicion and dread. "It's as if we're being fed a lie. We have to get to the bottom of this." Daniel, though trying to remain the calm voice of reason, felt his heart race as he realized that the situation was far more sinister than anyone had anticipated. In the corridors of power and within the hushed whispers of concerned citizens, the name Sally became a byword for fanaticism and reckless behavior. Every mention of her deeds stirred a bitter debate among friends, family members, and even the local authorities. The trial that loomed on the horizon was anticipated to be a landmark case, a stark reminder that emotions, when left unchecked, could lead to irreversible consequences. Sally's defense would argue that her actions were born of an overwhelming passion, a misguided attempt to salvage a love that had slipped through her fingers. Yet, the prosecution painted a far more damning portrait, a woman who had willingly crossed the line between love and obsession, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives and broken dreams. In the midst of this legal and emotional tempest, Chance continued his dogged pursuit of the truth. His every step, calculated and relentless, brought him closer to the heart of Sally's motivations. Was she truly the mastermind behind this spiraling disaster, or was there a deeper, more intricate story waiting to be unraveled? To those who had witnessed his unorthodox methods, Chance's involvement was a double-edged sword, a beacon of potential clarity for some, and a reminder of the pervasive distrust that had long festered in the city. His reputation as a useless cop might have been marred by past failures, but his current pursuit was one of desperation, as he sought to piece together the fragments of a narrative that had grown increasingly convoluted. The tension reached a fever pitch when, in a dramatic twist, the paths of these tormented souls finally converged. Summer's impassioned accusations against Sally, Billy's staunch defense of his girlfriend, Phyllis's pained pleas from the darkness, and Chance's relentless surveillance all collided in a moment of explosive revelation. As the authorities closed in on the derelict building where Sally had taken Phyllis captive, a sense of impending reckoning permeated the air. Within the oppressive confines of the basement, Phyllis's voice rose once more, a rallying cry for sanity amid the madness. "If you set me free, we can both find redemption," she insisted, her tone imbued with both desperation and a spark of hope. Yet, Sally's resolve remained unbroken, her eyes haunted by memories of a love that had once been pure but had since mutated into something unrecognizable. "You've left me no choice," she muttered, her voice barely audible as the realization of the consequences began to sink in. "If you try to escape, you will only bring more misery upon yourself." The scene that unfolded outside was equally chaotic. Summer, unable to contain her fury and fear any longer, confronted anyone who dared to suggest that Sally was not responsible. "She's the one," she insisted to skeptical onlookers, her voice echoing through the corridors of local gatherings. In Genoa City, only Sally could harbor such venom towards Phyllis. Yet, Billy's defense of his girlfriend struck a contrasting note, a plea for reason in the midst of a maelstrom of suspicion. "Don't let your anger blind you," he urged. "My girlfriend is a kind, gentle soul who would never commit an act as horrendous as this. We have to look at the facts, not our emotions." As the storm of allegations, defenses, and investigations swirled, Chance's shadowy figure moved ever closer to the truth. His covert surveillance of Sally, tracking her every move, following her into the darkest corners of Genoa City, was driven by an unwavering desire to restore order to the chaos. Despite the whispers of his ineffectiveness and the label of useless, Chance's persistence suggested that perhaps, after all, even the most underestimated among us might hold the key to unlocking the mystery of that fateful night. Ultimately, the unfolding drama was not just about the clash of personalities or the collision of conflicting loyalties, it was a stark reminder of the destructive power of unchecked emotions. In a city where love and hatred intertwined with such dangerous intensity, every character was forced to confront the consequences of their actions. For Sally, the path of vengeance had led her down a road from which there might be no return.